You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to say it's been a while. You know, it's been about 2 weeks since I put up an episode, and I want to say thank you to everybody for sticking with the podcast because I've just been so busy with everything. But we're finally getting back into the swing of things here. I actually was going to do a podcast the other day with Alex Ferrari. And not only did my computer die and I had to switch computers completely, I ended up switching microphones. I'm actually now using a Blue Yeti, which I'm not too crazy about, but that's all. Rather than give you all the details, I'm just going to say my computer died. I'm using a Blue Yeti now. And as I was about to interview Alex, my power went out. So Alex Ferrari, he's a very popular guest here. He's got a really popular podcast. He's going to be the guest on next week's episode as we sort of get back in the swing of things here. But also, I just want to say thanks again for everyone who continues to share on social media. It really does help out the podcast. And if you're interested in helping me shoot a short trailer project, not a film, a short trailer project in July, shoot me an email. It's just dave@davebullis.com. Put trailer project in the subject note, and I can tell you a little more about it. I'm a little behind the project right now because I've been working so much, as I've said before, but I'm still shooting to make this in July, and I think things are starting to come together now. Without further ado, on to this week's episode. My next guest is a film and videographer from Ottawa, Canada. He has been in the business for years, making different wildlife videos, and he and I are going to talk a lot about videography, doing interviews, even like this. What happens when somebody, you do a project and somebody says, hey, I can get my kid to make this for cheaper. Why am I paying you $10,000 or $5,000? I can get my kid to do it with an iPhone. We talk all about that stuff, which happens a lot nowadays, which is one of the reasons why I don't do it anymore. Because it just got such a pain in the ass. Because if your kid can do it, why the hell are you even talking to me? And I tell a little bit of some stories in this too about some of the things that I've encountered. And we're going to talk about BlackBox, which is what my next guest decided to make, and it's a really, really cool venture. I actually have affiliate links for it in the show notes as well if you want to support the podcast. But it's a place where videographers can upload stock footage, not only that, but feature films, and we're going to talk all about that in this show. As things have changed, I think it's important to you have to have all these different revenues for your projects, or revenues for yourself. They say that every millionaire has 7 different streams of revenue. So I think as you start to make different things, you have to always wonder, where am I going to put this stuff? If I want to go out and make some stock footage, maybe I'll get a sunset or whatever you're going to do. Where are you going to put all that? How it's going to actually affect where you're going to put it? And I think that's where this all comes in, because there's so many different stock footage places out there, but this is a little different. And as you can tell, the man behind it is a really great guy coming from a really good place, and that's why I think this is just not only an excellent interview, but I think this is the platform to do it on. Again, I might be a little biased. So without further ado, this is episode 215 with guest Pat McGowan.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
I was always a kid that was interested in a lot of different things, and I think I was pretty visual, but I was more on the audio side. I was a musician. I was interested in the music business. I worked as a musician for a long time, but I also had my scientific side. So I ended up doing like pre-meds in biology and psychology at college. And I was a photographer when I was a kid. So I was just kind of this mishmash, mixed up kid, didn't know what I wanted to do. But I had an opportunity when I was at college to join a rock band and do some studio work. And when I walked into the actual recording studio, it was a 16-track recording studio in Toronto, and I'll never forget the feeling that I was home. So I was really, I was a studio guy, and that led me into film as a composer and as an audio post guy, and then led me into more as a director. And, it's kind of best of all worlds for me.
So, but the people with all those varying interests, they usually end up making the most interesting people.
Well, I'm not going to say that. Maybe you can. At the end of the interview, let's see what you say then.
All right. Now the pressure's on, Pat. Now it has to be interesting. So basically, when you were going to college, and you were just doing all these different things, that kind of sounds like my route too. Because when I was going to college, I was doing 10,000 different things, but I was always the one thing I was steady was screenwriting and stuff like that. And then by the time I was ready to graduate, I was like, I don't want to do this one thing anymore, which was business. I was like, I don't want to go in that anymore. I'm about to get a degree in it, so it's like, what the hell?
I hear you, man. Absolutely. We're really lucky to do what we do, because we get to be involved in so many different things and so many different aspects of life. We get to travel. We get to meet a lot of people. In my corporate and government and film production life, I was on a new subject matter every week or two, and you had to become an instant expert, and you had to be able to hold your own, especially if you were interviewing people like you do. And, it's just been a wonderful ride.
Yeah, interviewing people, I've just as a side note, this podcast has really helped me in other ways, too. It's only made me like a better conversationalist, but it just, you can pretty much not talk to anybody. I mean, I was always pretty good before at networking, but I think this is maybe from like good to like great, because now you have the confidence just to go up and strike a conversation about anything.
Yeah, for sure, man. You just have to ask 2 or 3 questions, and people love to talk about themselves and what they do, and if you just get out of their way, normally you'll get some gold.
Yeah, very, very true. That's why I tend to let people just sort of the guests take over the conversation, because a lot of times my guests will say, "Oh my God, I just was talking," and I said, "Well, that's a good thing, because people because I'm here every week, I go, the guest is only here for the one time, so I might as well showcase them."
Well, once you get me going, you're not going to shut me up that easily.
Hey, I always say, feel free to talk as much as you want, and I won't edit it and make it look bad or anything.
All right, sounds good to me, man.
So, Pat, when you're going out there and you're doing like freelance videography work and stuff like that, and you're doing commercial work and etc., what are some of the things that you've learned, or some of the tips that you could like give? Because I had a friend of mine, for instance, he always would go into like different stores, like mom and pop stores and pizza places and stuff, and he would always say to the owner, "Hey, this is a really cool place, this is a really cool blah blah blah," and he always would try to different locations. He always would keep in the back of his mind in case he ever had to film there for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever do you have any tips like that about how you maybe got maybe met different people in different places?
Yeah, no question about that, especially because of some of the work that I do, and a lot of the work that I ended up doing had to do with filming, B-roll and stock footage. So you're always on the lookout for friendly people that can give you access. You're always on the lookout for great locations that you can return to later. So yeah, you just really keep your eyes peeled and figure it out. And if you end up doing, a TV series or whatever, you've kind of got, in my case, I'm Canadian and I've got Canada mapped. I've been all over the country. I've been all in every single province. I've been in every single city, and we know a lot of people. And, the thing is that we're all kind of connected now. So once you make those relationships and you understand the mapping, then it's so much easier to go back. And the next time you're there, you kind of know where you are. And so you just kind of keep your eyes peeled and develop the relationships as you move along.
Yeah, building relationships, that is the key part of this, my friend. Building relationships.
It's all about people, no question. And it's getting more and more about people every day, in spite of the fact that I think we've been kind of trained with social media and so on that we can, live in our hobbit holes and still be connected, which is true. But actually sitting down and talking to people and getting to know them and being with them is the only way to really connect. And I think we have an opportunity now, to do that more and more on a global level as well. So we kind of put it all together and say we got all these platforms and everything. But when you go there and the relationships, the world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's not a virtual world. It's a virtual and a real world, and you have to live in both.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I'm guilty of that too, where I try to just, I consciously made that decision. You know, I don't know about you, Pat, but I got burned out from going to networking events. I mean, I got burned out. I used to be Mr. Networking Event too, and eventually I stopped because I said, you know what? Eventually you start to realize, you know, half these people are they're not gonna make anything because they really don't want to make anything. They want to go somewhere and be seen and take photos and stuff like that. And your goals aren't the same thing as them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't really know how to respond to that, Dave, because I do a fair bit of networking, and I usually end up meeting at least one or two people at, you know, whatever the event is, where you end up actually getting a good forged relationship. But, you know, I think you're right. I think a lot of people are just going to party or drink or whatever their thing is. And, you know, you kind of have to be able to weed that out. We did a networking event in Toronto about a month ago. And yeah, there were a lot of people there that were just there for the beer. But a number of people I ended up developing, you know, some really good contacts with and relationships with. Because as we'll get into a little bit later, we're actually trying to grow a global movement. So that means that we have to find the people that are interested in having that connection and then reaching out and having that global network, so that you know, creators like us actually have a safer place to operate. So yeah, I know what you mean though. Like some of the networking events, there's a lot of posing and posturing and a lot of bullshit. But you know, there's usually some pretty good people at most of these things.
Yeah, and I always feel free to always disagree with me. You know, most people do. It's always good too to hear two different opinions on the podcast. You know, and so let's just say, you know, going to these networking events, you know, whether they're in Canada like you are or they're in the you know, United States like I am. Wherever they might be listening to this, you know, what are some of the tips that you have for networking? You know, just like going out there and meeting people, and some of the things that you maybe even like warning signs that you kind of see of people to stay away from.
Well, I think the main thing is just to be open and honest and transparent. And, you know, again, you know, it comes down to some people skills too, being able to walk up to somebody and say, hey, my name is, what's your name? What do you do? Tell me more. Be able to ask those 3 or 4 questions that are going to get them comfortable so that they can, you know, actually participate in a conversation with you. Or if they're cagey, you know, you kind of break down their defenses a little bit. And, you know, so that you can actually have a one-on-one conversation. The thing I always watch for is eye contact, actually. If people are not going to engage you with eye contact, then it's going to be tougher work. Or if they're kind of, you know, looking around to see if there's a better person to talk to, maybe they think you're not worth it or you've got nothing for them. I also really kind of watch out for people that don't ask questions back, because that means that they're not engaged in the conversation. And if you got to prod and prod and prod, I say just cut it off, say thanks a lot, and move on. Go talk to somebody else.
And you know what? I like that too, Pat, because I think that works for, you know, even you know, virtual meetings. Like, you know, if you meet somebody online, maybe you see their Facebook or something or their Twitter or whatever. I found that people who just kind of, you have to keep prodding them, whether it be like, hey, this or that, you know, about this or that, or you know, they don't want to ask you about what you do or whatever. Those are generally the people where you're kind of like, all right, they're not in this meeting, and you know, we're just wasting each other's time at this point.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. But again, you know, like we kind of get back to this whole idea of what we do professionally too. And I interview a lot of people. I mean, I've actually, if I had to count the interviews I've done thousands in my career. And, you know, I kind of conduct myself as if I'm doing an interview. I like to ask a lot of questions. So if I'm trying to engage somebody even on Facebook, you know, I'll ask them, what do you do? You know, what's your specialty? What are you up to? What kind of projects are you working on? What's pissing you off? You know, like what barriers do you have in your life right now that, you know, you could do better with? And I find that, you know, I'd say that probably 7 out of 10 people are willing to have the conversation. once they realize the big thing these days is no one wants to be sold to, so they're always on their guard about what do you want from me, right? So if you can kind of break through that, it's easier to get a more meaningful discussion going. And yeah, hey man, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I am selling. Sometimes I do want you to get involved with what we're doing. But if you go right in with that pitch hard at the beginning, your chances are going to go down. So, you've got to really get human, have a human conversation, be sincere, be honest. And like I said, I think 7 out of 10 people will generally engage. And the other 3, well, you know what? So be it. No big deal, no problem. Or maybe they'll come back later. Who knows?
So, you mentioned doing thousands and thousands of interviews. So let's just, go back to that and how you sort of got started doing that, back to actually going around and just, talking to all these different people. So how did that whole journey start? Were you just going around interviewing all these people?
Well, I usually interview people when I'm on assignment. So if we're producing a video where we need to collect interviews, or if we're doing a doc, that's my job. So I'm the guy that sits in the chair and directs the shoot and does the interviewing. And, I've learned a whole lot doing it. I learned a lot about psychology, a lot about people. But yeah, so it all starts with a project. Typically I love to go in cold. I don't do a lot of research when I do interviews. I want to explore the information along the path of the interview rather than walking in with 39 questions and just running through the questions. We want to find out what people are passionate about. So you've got to read their body language. Like, interviewing is a really interesting thing. You're usually working at least 2 levels and probably 3. So you've got your physical situation where you've got to engage with body language that allows the person to feel A, comfortable, but B, also you want them to know that you're interested, and body language has an awful lot to do with that. You can turn people off so easily with the wrong body language. So you got to be really well versed in how that works, and you also have to be able to read body language to know where you're going to go with this thing. The other level you're working at is at the intellectual level. So you're gonna, I always say, when I'm doing interviews, my brain is actually recording the interview so that I know where all the contextual points are. I know where the pickups and drop-offs are. I know how to correct people. I know how to redirect them. So as I'm sitting there, nodding and smiling and using body language, my brain is just furiously processing what they're saying. So you have to listen and actually process it and embed it and store it, so that later in the interview you can come back and make a what I call a contextual link to what was said before. And that is often when you get the best stuff. And then you've got the other level, which is the conversation level, because now I've got to respond in a conversational way that's actually reasonably intelligent, and and lets people know that I care about what they're saying, I understand what they're saying, and I know enough about what they're saying to actually have them feel validated and engaged. So it's a really, really interesting process, and you end up exhausted at the end of them. Some interviews you just burn so much brain energy that, you need to go for lunch like right away. So it's an amazing process, actually. And a lot of people, I see some young folks coming out, and the biggest caution that I would say is don't just run the questions. Right? Don't just run the questions. Get yourself into that conversation. Be interested in what people are saying. And you'd be amazed at what you're going to get. And one tip I always use with a lot of the people I interview is I don't respond to them as soon as they stop talking. Because sometimes if you leave a 5-second pregnant pause in the conversation, they're going to say what they really mean. Right? Because a lot of people get very nervous, and they're vetting what they're saying. And, we've had people in the chair crying because they couldn't do the interview because they were so nervous. But if you just let them sit, just let it go and don't stop the camera and don't cut, sometimes that's when the best stuff happens.
I was giving you the pregnant pause there.
I know.
But you know, it's a friend of mine once gave me this piece of advice, and he said to me that whenever he's negotiating, he always puts in that pregnant pause on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Because he always says the first person that talks loses.
You know what? On the business side, if you talk too much, you lose the deal. That's all there is to it. You got to learn how to sit.
Yeah, and he's a fellow Canadian too, Pat.
Oh yeah, where's he from?
I believe he's from Toronto.
Okay.
Because
that's where all the sharks live in Canada.
All he does is talk about the housing market there, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Especially now.
Yeah, he all he does is talk about the housing market, and he just like about the insanity of it. But again, that's a whole other thing. Well, actually, maybe it's interesting. Maybe he's accusing some people of like Chinese millionaires and billionaires of using these houses as sort of like a money laundering scam. I don't know if that's true or not, but hey, anything's possible.
Well, you know what, man? I think that happens in London, New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Vancouver, certainly West Coast. Definitely there's a lot of Chinese money on the move. I don't know if it's dirty money or not. I have no opinion about that. But I know, Vancouver is ridiculous. And it's actually more ridiculous than Toronto. But there's a big correction about to happen. So I wouldn't be buying any high-priced real estate in Toronto just right now. I think I'd walk away from that.
Yeah, it's I heard about that too, about that correction. But just to get back to what we're talking about with interviewing, I wanted to ask you a question, and I'll tell you my funny story first. I wanted to ask you about one of the worst interviews you've ever done, because again, we always learn more from our mistakes than from our successes. And so what happened was, when I was working in higher ed, they had asked me. To do this, this probably isn't the worst one, but it's the funniest one. So they asked me to do this interview segment with the girls' volleyball team, and the coach, who was a part-time coach, showed up late, and he has all these questions, just scribbled on a piece of paper. It's all cut up. He just ripped it out of a notebook, and he's asking these questions. Well, these girls are talking about stuff that I could never ever use in a school setting. They're talking about doing drugs. They're talking about they're trash talking their teammates. They're doing this and that, and the coach was reading the same questions to each girl because we told him to, and then he would ask a couple different questions here and there, and finally when he asked me could I put this together, and I said, you don't want me to use any of that. I said, except for one girl, those girls were, trash talking girls, shit talking this and that. And he goes, yeah, right, I guess. Well, you could just put something together. So I put this thing together, and Pat, let me tell you, his face dropped, and he goes, you're right, I could never use any of this. He goes, it was so hilarious, because what I would do is I kind of gave it like the MTV style of editing, where I was like, here you go, here's what they think of this, and this, and it was like, they thought, oh, what do you think of this thing? Oh, it's terrible, it sucks, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you can't use any of that. You can't have the school promote this. But it was just hilarious, just because of how ridiculous it was. So, Pat, I want to throw the question to you. What was one of the worst, times you've had, doing an interview segment?
Well, I was telling you a few minutes ago, I had this poor woman who was so upset that she couldn't perform. So, this is one of the things that we tell people: do not try to memorize what you're going to say in the interview. Like, don't take our like a lot of the institutional or government types or bureaucratic types. They want you to send them the questions in advance so they can prepare. So then they end up writing Ben-Hur so that they can answer these questions, and it's just ridiculous what they come in with, like pages and pages and pages, and you're just looking at them going, you can't possibly, there's no way you're going to be able to do that. And this lady that I was working with, and it was a very serious subject matter, and she was like the CEO, and she was brilliant, really intelligent person, very beautiful woman, clearly very professional. But boy, she was nervous, and I could tell as soon as she walked in the room, it was going to be trouble. So we got her in the chair. It was in a studio setting, everything's controlled environment. And we got her in the chair, and she could not do it. Could not do it. And I think she had like a tiny little nervous breakdown. Anyways, we had her in the chair for 2 hours because she wouldn't quit either. I kept telling her, you need to take a break, don't worry about it. And we were being really, really kind, and accommodating. And she was in the chair for 2 hours, and I thought she was just going to snap. It was a horrible experience. It was painful, actually, for everybody in the room. Even the camera guy and producer was in the room. Her colleagues were in the room, and everybody just felt so bad. So that's, I know that's not like, talking to a bunch of teenage girls trash talking each other. I haven't really had that experience, but, that was probably the worst one. It's just terrible when you get people who are so upset that they're judging themselves so harshly when all they have to do is just talk like we're having coffee, right? And I've got like a zillion techniques that I use to get people to settle down and to relax and stop being so freaked out. But sometimes they just don't work. They just don't work. And, some of the worst ones we do are actually when the client, tells us, well, we don't have travel budget to send you to locations, so we're going to hire a camera guy locally, and can you direct by Skype? And those are really, really hard to do because you don't have the personal connection. You can't do eye contact properly. And if you get somebody who's tough to deal with in that situation, sometimes the client's grinding on you because, well, why couldn't you get it? What's so hard about this? And I'm going, well, I guess you haven't done several thousand interviews, so it's going to be hard for me to explain this to you. But they sucked. So what do you want me to do? I can't force these people to give a good interview, basically. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and, there's money on the line and everything. So my attitude is always the same. And I always ask myself this question in all production situations. It's basically like, who's going to die here? Like, what are the stakes? Okay, so nobody's going to die. Everybody relax. Let's just do our jobs, and we'll do our good jobs. We're all professionals. Let's just get this done. But, we don't need stress and pressure in production situations. It's just a completely ridiculous waste of time when you do that.
Yes. I could not agree more, man. I've been a part of both productions like that, where it's been, sort of more loose, and then other was where it was just, you'd walk on set and you could just feel the tension.
Oh yeah.
Where the director doesn't like the DP, and the DP doesn't like the producer doesn't like the director, and you're just kind of like, wow, who the hell needs this stuff?
It's just bullshit.
Yeah.
So, I came to a point in my career where I just said, I'm not doing bullshit anymore. I'm just not doing it. It's not worth it. So now I hunt situations with my startup, BlackBox, where it's a no bullshit deal. And even when I do some freelance work or I'm doing contract work, I try to work it so that there's no bullshit, and it's all about the work and doing good work and making sure they have a pleasant experience and you end up with a good product. And that's the bottom line, because there's just no need for that.
Yeah, that's so true, and I also like that phrase. There's just no more bullshit products. So, projects. I'm sorry. And was there a point, by the way, Pat, where what was there like a project in particular that finally just set you over the edge?
Well, that's a big question, Dave. So, the answer is yes and no. I had a huge project that we had won that was a museum job. And it was $1 million contract. It was a big contract. And there were a number of players involved, design agency out of the States, and a lot of curators and a lot of experts. And it was a very, very difficult project. The product at the end was absolutely wonderful, but there were so many human-imposed turf defending types of interactions during the process that it really became a very unpleasant project. And it could have been, really rewarding to do. So it was just basically people being people, and defending their turf and, whatever was going on. And really, it was during that project that I said to myself, okay, I've been in this business a long time. I've had a great career. I think I'm ready to move away from doing this type of work, because the bureaucracy and the layers of crap were sucked the soul right out of your chest, and then you couldn't even be creative anymore because they took all the fun out of it. And, I don't want to be cynical or anything, but there's a lot of that going on these days, right? Where it's just, there's so much bureaucracy, there's so much political correctness, there's so much business pressure that, honestly, a lot of these jobs just aren't fun to do anymore.
Yes, and that's what happened to me too when I got burned out. Not even just doing freelance work, but like other work in general, and just here's another story for you. When I was doing freelance work, somebody asked me to come do this they said it's just an interview. We're going over all this stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And I get there, and it's a whole 180 from what they told me it was going to be. Oh, and instead, it was just a competition about who could use this saw the fastest or whatever. And it was like this whole sort of convention. And I said to the guy, I said, wait a minute, this is completely different than what you said it was going to be. Oh, yeah. And I mean, he was like, the kicker was too, Pat? I showed up there, and he had no idea who I was. And I said, aren't you, and I won't use his name, but I said, aren't you blank? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, I'm Dave, the videographer. He goes, videographer for what? And I said, well, I'm doing some interview thing today or something. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. So I go outside, I look at the business, and I'm like, wait, yeah, this is it. This is the place. And then I call my friend who had introduced us, and she comes out, and she goes, oh, yeah, that's him. And I go back in there, and I look at him, and I say, hey, I'm Dave. We've been talking back and forth for like a month now. And he goes, oh, yeah, I forgot you were coming. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. It just went downhill from there, Pat.
Well, you know what? I don't want to get on a negative soapbox or anything because, things have changed, that's for sure. But this is just an example of how I think the perceptions of what we do in the industry have changed a lot over the past 5 years, let's say. So I think the perception of, how professional we are, how well trained and experienced we are. I think some people think that we are a bit of a commodity, right? It's just the video guy. Oh yeah, whatever, right? But they still want it done perfectly, but they don't even know what that entails. So, like I said, I don't want to get down on it too much because I'm going to sound like a grumpy old man. But, things have changed, and the perception of what a professional does in our industry and who they are has changed a lot. And, quite frankly, I think in a lot of instances, we're seeing a lot of bad work being done, in that context. And the clients don't even know that it's bad work anymore because the wrong person on their team is actually handling it. So, we got this weird thing going on right now where, it's, and it's always been that way. I mean, we always had what we call the bottom feeders in the industry that just did shitty work, but everyone knew who they were and so on. And they got hired on certain gigs, but usually not. And those of us that were kind of working the higher end of the market, we knew who was who. But these days, it's like, if I tell a client, if I have a client tell me one more time in a meeting, well, you guys are super overpriced because, actually my son is taking film studies and he's going to do it for us for $100. And, I just got tired of having those meetings, honestly. And these days, the one question I get asked by clients in meetings is, can you do it cheaper? Consistently. So it's time to say, actually, no, I can't do it cheaper. And if you want it done cheaper, you can get it done by somebody else. No problem. But, at the same time, the work is a little more scarce than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. And the prices of the higher priced jobs are actually coming down. So we're looking at a situation where our market is becoming commoditized, as I say. We are less of a custom valued service than we were. We're now expected to do work for the same rate that we were working for, 20 years ago. Think about it. The rates haven't changed really very much, if at all. And now they're going down again for the contract work that we do in video and film.
So at what point, again, when I read your bio, you mentioned that, you realized you woke up one day and you realized you had been disrupted, and I think that's a big part of it, because what you said there is with hey, I'm just going to have my son do it. I actually, let me tell you, I've had other people say that too, and or I'm going to have my son edit this or whatever else, and it's like, hey, more power to you if you think that your son can do it. It's just one of those things. But so, at what point did you then create, BlackBox?
Well, I created BlackBox where I didn't create it 3 years ago. I ideated it 3 years ago. So I was sitting in my boardroom, realizing that I had built, a beautiful company. I had 40 employees. I had offices in 2 cities. Had a really great team, and I realized that the market had changed. So I realized a couple of things. First of all, we were involved in some broadcast work here in Canada. And you're familiar with the cutting the cord phenomenon. But what happens in markets like Canada is when the cord gets cut, the cable fees that people were paying are no longer allocated for broadcast production by the broadcasters, because that's how they get their money. And then in our market, the Canadian government has, some fund matching programs and so on, tax credits that are all predicated on the broadcasters coming to the table. Well, the broadcasters stopped coming to the table because they were making less money because people were cutting the cord. And why were they cutting the cord? To go and watch content from digital platforms like Netflix and YouTube and what have you. So that's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened at the same time is that technology became much more readily available with the advent of DSLR camera technology. So all of a sudden, the cost of acquiring equipment went down, if that's what you were going to buy. It wasn't high-end gear, it was low-end gear, but it was low-end gear that was doing good-looking product. And the third thing that happened is we had a lot of young people coming into the market, and people like to beat up on millennials. Personally, I don't think that's right. I know a lot of millennials, and I really like these guys. But unfortunately, they came into a market where they could tool themselves and were competent enough because they were doing some good work. I mean, when I say that the son could do it, the son could really do it, but the son should have been getting paid $500 a day rather than $100. That's my point. So the commodification happened on the perceived value of the work, right? From the client saying, well, my kid can do it for $100 rather than you doing it for $500 or whatever, or 1,000, which is what we used to get. So now we've got these 3 factors. We've got a glut of labor willing to work at lower pricing. And why would millennials work at lower pricing? Well, a lot of them were either living in apartments with roommates and they don't have car payments. They don't have college funds to build. They're not building for retirement. They're young. And because it used to be, there were barriers to entry coming into the market. If you were going to be a video production company owner, you better have the ability to acquire capital so you could buy high-end cameras for $100,000 each. Edit systems cost a fortune. You had to have an edit bay. You had to have a voiceover booth. You had to have a small studio. Well, all that's gone now. Like kids are these millennials. Sorry, again, I don't like the term, but younger people, they're editing at Starbucks or they're forming into collectives where they're sharing small office spaces, and that's okay with them because they can cut the video on a MacBook or a Surface or whatever. And they can shoot it on a DSLR, and they're not using a $20,000 Satchler tripod anymore. They're using a $1,000, Vinton or whatever, or a Manfrotto. So everything. It wasn't just that one thing commodified and disrupted. Everything changed at the same time. And then you had a lot of institutional clients, like government clients or businesses, even bigger businesses, smaller businesses, bringing somebody in-house. So they would hire a young person to do it in-house. And why? Well, because the young person had the camera, had the edit bay in their pocket, had control over, and these kids are quite well trained and they're multifaceted. Like, they can shoot and edit. They know how to do audio. They're not terrible at it. They're good at it. So, this disruption had to do with that whole change from, a team of 3 or 4 people doing work to a team of 1 or 2 doing work that didn't have an office, probably weren't insured, you know what I mean? Didn't have staff. So all of this happened at the same time. So here I am sitting there, a 25-year veteran of the business, and yeah, we did get disrupted. We got disrupted at 3 levels. We had in 2015, we had 4 broadcast projects canceled because there were 3 different broadcasters involved. Were laying people off. So, they were just canceling series, and we had 4 series canceled. There's a huge amount of money involved. So yeah, we got hit pretty hard. So I'm sitting in my boardroom with my wife, and I'm like, okay, we're not making money. Who's making money? What's going on here? So we sat and we did a bunch of research, and we concluded that there were 2 ends of the spectrum that were making money. There was the YouTube crowd, and that was prior to the YouTube apocalypse that happened a year or so ago. And that was before they changed the monetization. But that's another problem that we can talk about. But there were a lot of YouTubers who were making money. And we found, we just said, let's go look at the top 10 YouTubers and see who's making money and see what they're making. And, as a kind of a trained, experienced filmmaker, it was pretty shocking because I hadn't paid much attention to YouTube. Stupid me. And you're kind of looking at it going, wow, this stuff is popular. Why? Well, we kind of figured with a couple of things. It was probably because a 4-year-old sitting in the back of mommy's SUV hitting the iPad again and again and again, and people were making millions of dollars. There's this one channel we found called Disney Collector. And this is a Hispanic woman with really nice blingy fingernails and a really sweet-sounding voice who shows you how to use Play-Doh, right? Disney character Play-Doh shit. And the woman has now got 250 million views on one of her videos or more. And she's purported to make $12 million a year or more from her YouTube bucks. Okay, so that's just an eye-opener. And then I looked at the other end of the spectrum with Netflix, and Netflix had not even started to, I don't even think Orange is the New Black had been produced. 2015, yeah, maybe it was, because I guess they're going into season 4. At any rate, and we started to think, okay, well, we've got this distribution platform that's actually starting to create content. So what they're doing is they're aggregating the rights to intellectual property at the top of their organization. And producers who used to make shows, own shows, and license shows to broadcasters are not going to be able to do that for very long. So it made me kind of think, the term that I believe came to me at the time was user-generated content. So you got YouTubers making user-generated content, and you got Netflix making user-generated content. But where are creators in all of that? Well, in the YouTube case, you've got 1 or 2 people making this stuff. There aren't very many teams of trained people doing it, although there's lots of cool stuff going on YouTube right now. But in the Netflix example, basically creators were turned into workers. So, and that's not bad when the rates are good and everything, but as I understand it, the rates are dropping. And the people that I know in markets where, big platforms are making a lot of content, the rates are static. They're stale. They've stalled. And even studio owners and equipment rental houses are getting really, really pushed on rate. So basically, everybody's making money except Netflix. And people who want to gig in this industry, they're really just looking for work. And they're being forced to take longer hour days for less money. And I'm not saying that's happening everywhere. Lots of people are going to say, hey, man, that's not true where I am or whatever. But it is true where a lot of people are. Because through our platform, I hear these people. I know them. And they want a better deal. So I decided to create a platform that was all about creators being able to do user-generated content alone or in groups and gain access to global markets, not have to sell themselves as workers, but convert to being owners of the content that they make and take advantage of all the licensing fees, long-tail revenue, or residuals, all the terms apply, and do better in their lives. And we want to do that on a global context where every creator all over the world actually has the same access. Because they have the same access to technology and tools, but they don't have the same access to markets and business systems. So what we designed is a platform that has really captured and automated all of the things that creators need in order to work together, to make content, to co-own the content, and to share in the revenue streams that are developed through these new digital platforms. So we think it's really revolutionary.
So it's again, you touched on YouTube, and I had friends who were creators who saw their monetization cut down. Some channels, were even gotten into trouble with all the new rules. And I have another friend who's just getting back into it, and he has one of the top YouTube channels ever, which is crazy.
Cool.
But just going back to BlackBox, it's allowing. So basically, it's cutting out the middleman essentially. You know what I mean? It's you can actually go on there and actually don't have to worry about selling. You know what I'm trying to say? You're basically cutting out the middleman, right?
Yeah, no, but I think I can help you understand a little bit. But we're not cutting anybody out,
okay?
Because they're already cut out. Okay, being a producer is a much harder game because you've actually been turned into a worker again. Now there are people who are developing product as producers and selling it to Netflix or licensing to Netflix, and that hasn't died, but a lot of that business has gone away. So what's happened is like people that used to be producers, like actual producers, have now become service producers. So they're getting paid, by whoever their client is, and it could be ABC, NBC, it could be Hulu, it could be Netflix, it could be anybody. They're getting paid to manufacture the project for those companies, not with them, right? So that's really changed. So everybody all the way down the line is now a worker. But and that would be fine as long as the disruption wasn't happening where the rates were dropping. So I mean, it's bad enough that the business model changed to the point where people couldn't own their own content, but the rates are going down. So what does that mean for the future? Well, it means we're going to have a commodified labor market. Look at what happened in visual effects, right? Visual effects, you used to go to LA and you go down by Santa Monica Pier and there were all these nice 2-3-story buildings that were full of visual effects houses. Well, they're all gone now. And there's a saying in Hollywood amongst certain executive producers that goes like this: if you haven't put a VFX company out of business on your film, you're not doing your job right. So what's happened with VFX companies, I mean, when you go and see blockbuster movies now, you used to see like ILM would be in there or whoever, right? Well, now you see, look at the end credits. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who are employed in the VFX game, but they're working for 50 companies, right? So instead of seeing ILM crew of 200 people on the end credits, you're seeing, 50 companies with 10 to 15 people. So what's happened there is that the VFX companies have been divided and conquered into smaller and smaller units. So now the producers, the big guys, can actually go in and hammer them on price a little more effectively because they're playing them off against each other. And I know this sounds horribly cynical. And, if there's a Netflix exec listening, hey, I'm just coming from the creator perspective, right? Where I think that there's a better deal for creators, that creators should and can now have the ability to have their piece of the pie and to have better lives as a result of that, and to be able to do the work they do with a lot more freedom. I created BlackBox to have more freedom for me and for my creator colleagues, because we are special people. I call it the creator class, actually. And so the creator class for me are people who are talented, generous, kind, hardworking, resourceful, honest people. And I would say 99% of the people that I know that are creators fall into those categories. So that means we're going to get beat up as business people, plain and simple. So what we do is kind of we create a platform that's a safe haven that allows creators to actually not worry about all that business stuff, because just like so many other businesses, we want to automate a lot of it so that there's not a lot of backroom deals going on. The sharks can't play, basically. We make a product and we move it through a market, just like any other industry. You look at the auto manufacturing industry, right? They've got this thing called the supply chain. And the supply chain means that all these parts are created by all these suppliers and brought together at the assembly plant. And it has to be all coordinated properly. Well, you know what? Making a movie is no different than building a car. It's a supply chain. You have to bring all these resources together. They have to happen at the right time. Budgets have to be respected, and then you deliver to the customer. So what I've done is created a platform that allows creators to be part of the supply chain and to own the end product as they're moving along. So it's a really big shift in terms of an economic reality. We liken it, Dave, to a return to the guild system, prior to the Industrial Revolution, where guilds actually had these inherent protections in place. If you were building a cathedral and you needed stonework done, you went to the stonemasons. And if you needed a bunch of pews done and woodwork done in the church, you went to the Carpenters Guild. And so what we are is a creators guild, and we're global and we're digital, and we are going to change the face of the industry.
And I know exactly where you're coming from, by the way, about the VX situation. I actually have friends, because I've actually had friends who've worked in the industry, and they were describing, pretty much what you just described as well. But BlackBox looks awesome. I'm all in favor of anything that allows, creators, good creators, to share their stuff and to actually get seen. Because like I've said before in this podcast, the idea of just uploading something to YouTube now and saying, hey, it'll go viral is like a 1 in a million shot. And you can't rest anything on that. That's not a business plan.
For sure, man. Well, that's standard fragmentation. But we're working within a global context, and we're working within a digital platform context. Nobody's done this before, so no one really knows the rules. But we do know that there is an awful lot of money being aggregated at the top of these multinational corporations. And then you have to bring in the idea that some of them are publicly traded corporations, so that whole dynamic is very different too. So who ends up getting caught in the vice are the individual creators, because in fact, as these companies blew apart, I had a company with 40 people, right? And that company is pretty much gone now. So the protections that were afforded to the workers within that relationship that they had with me as their boss, they're on their own now, right? So what we're doing is we're actually saying, look, we don't want to aggregate these people back into a company again, but we want to have a platform that performs those functions for them, that allows them to have a little more predictability and security in their life. So, and I should tell you that we analyzed the market and we said, look, ultimately, we want black boxers, we call them black boxers, to be able to do the work they love to do. So if they are they want to work on feature films, and they're a gaffer. We want them, and they love being a gaffer. We want them to be able to be a gaffer on a great feature film, on regular work. And if they're an actress, we want them to be an actress. And if they're a musician, we want them to be a composer. We want them to be able to do what they love to do. So what we allow them to do is come together into groups of like-minded creators and make the project they want to make. That is, that has a lot more creative freedom for everybody. Now, not most. A lot of people they just want their gig and they want to get paid and they want to go home and they want to be safe and they want to make money and they want to take care of their families, and that's never going to end. But we offer an alternative to people who, kind of feel that desire to really be involved in something that takes a lot of craft, a lot of love, and ends up being a very valuable product. So I'm going to give you an example. Moonlight won the Academy Award 2 years ago, and Moonlight was made for reputedly $1.5 million bucks. And then there was a big marketing budget, well, not big, $5 million probably, that went against it. So Moonlight ends up getting a theatrical run that did well, and then they ended up doing very well on VOD and cable, and they won an Academy Award. But I have to wonder, okay, this movie is going to make $150 million after production net. Who's getting that money? Is it the people that sacrificed their rate, showed up, did the extra hours, put the love into it, and made the movie? Or is it somebody else? Well, I think we all know the answer is it's somebody else. So my question is, what if a group of filmmakers could come together, make a product like Moonlight, and now the budget is not going to be $1.5 million because no one's getting paid. You're doing it in kind for ownership in the movie. And then if you've got some fixed costs, but we can bring everybody into this scenario. Studio owners that are getting squeezed can actually let us use the studio for a piece of the movie. Camera department. Maybe they've got 2-year-old cameras that aren't being rented for full price anymore that they'll put on the movie for a piece of the action. Craft, anybody involved, location owners, transport, the works. And you're still going to have some fixed costs. So now you can make the movie for a really good movie for $200,000 or $300,000 or less. It all depends on, what your consumables are. So now you make the movie. Great. And it's owned by the people that made it. Okay? This is a key thing. Now, if that movie goes out and it makes $150 million net after distribution or whatever, okay? And you can even bring a marketing team in to be part of your group. So you don't have to go pay for marketing. You can find a marketing group and say, do you want to be part of this, right? Anybody can be part of it. The distribution people can be part of it. So you create this wonderful waterfall saying, okay, all these dollars that come in, they're all going pro rata to the people that own the property. And by my math, on a $1.5 million feature that does $150 million net after distribution over a period of time, because it's long tail money, and that's how money gets made on distribution platforms now, everyone would get paid 100 times the rate. Good, bad? What do you think?
That sounds like a good trade-off.
Yeah, man. So where we started is saying we're going to dream big, right? At BlackBox, we're going to dream big. We're going to say we want to make blockbuster feature films. We would love to be able to make a Black Panther in 5 years and have all of the people that made the movie get a really nice paycheck, right? Because they deserve it. We love these people. They need this opportunity because right now it's not working out so good, right? So that's our dream. But we couldn't start there. So we decided to build our platform in a smaller, more highly defined market, and that's the stock footage market. So currently our platform services stock footage. So what you can do is you can take your camera right now, like you're a camera guy, right, Dave?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you own your own gear?
Yeah, I have it right here. Actually, it's actually right behind me. You can't see it because it's a podcast, but yeah, it's right behind me.
So what kind of camera are you running?
I have a Canon Rebel. I think it's the 60, the 7D?
Okay, so let's say you've got a 6D. You could probably walk out of where you are right now, and it's not daylight there anymore. So let's say you get up in the morning and go for a walk, and you see something beautiful that you want to capture. So you do it. And then you see something else that you want to capture, or maybe, whatever. And this is a very simple example, mind you. So, but you can then go home and you can actually curate that into 5 very nice clips. You can put them up to our platform. We'll take them out to all the big stock agencies. And when the money comes, it returns to BlackBox. And then we take 15% of the net sale and we deliver the rest to you. So basically, it's an upload once, get to many scheme. Now, let's say you go back to your house and you say, oh, I don't want to edit this. Pat, you want to edit this? And you call me up and you say, you want to edit my clips? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll do it for 30%. And you go, okay, deal, 30%. So now you can upload those clips to BlackBox or send me the raw. And I will actually edit them, upload them, tag them, and do the metadata. And then when the money comes, BlackBox automatically pays me my share, and you automatically get paid your share. You don't touch my money, I don't touch your money. Or another option is you want to edit, but you hate doing the metadata. You hate doing the keywords and the descriptions and all that. So you can actually edit them, upload them, and then hand off to me, and I'll do the metadata, and I'll do it for 15%. So that's what we built, and it actually works. So we've got thousands of people all over the world doing this. I just saw a project go through where a guy in South Africa had 700 clips. He put them up on the platform, and he assigned the curation the metadata curation to a woman here in Ottawa, where I live, actually, who's a very good editor. So now we've got this international collaboration going, and it all happens within our platform. So that's where we started. And our next move is into short form and long form. And you can do YouTube videos this way. So like I said earlier, a lot of YouTubers, they want to do everything themselves because they want to keep the money, right? And they don't know what they're going to make, and it's all freaking everybody out. Well, what if you said, well, why don't we do this as a team? Why don't we actually do some produced content where we actually use real writer, real director, real, and everybody works together and makes some product that's watchable. And then you put it to BlackBox, and we manage the whole process of getting it to audience and then dividing the revenue. And it works. I mean, that's all I have to say. It works. It works really, really well. And then as we grow, we're going to take on bigger projects, indie films. Right now, if there are indie filmmakers that have had no luck distributing their film, you can contact me, and I will find a way to get your film onto our platform. You will have to go back and figure out who did what on the movie, so you can make sure that everybody gets compensated when the money comes. And then we will, through our developing relationships with distribution and VOD, we'll have a good chance of getting your movie seen. So this is what we're trying to do.
And I think that's great too, Pat. I mean, you mentioned Black Panther. I'm always in favor of the movies like Moonlight, or movies like obviously The Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity. Those movies that come out of left field that just they go ape shit. Big Fat Greek Wedding. These movies that are shot for like $20,000 and they have a pretty good return. Just as we talk about gear and producers and stuff. I once had a friend of mine who was going to make a movie for $10,000, and this person who owned a rental house got a hold of him, and he came back to tell me, he goes, Dave, I can't do it for $10,000 anymore. I need $250,000. And I said, no, you don't. I said, well, for the love of God, you don't need a quarter. I've read his script. He did not need $250,000. He could have done it for $10,000 at the max, because it only took place in one room. There was no stunts or explosives. There's no squibs. There's nothing. There's no famous people that were needed or were going to be in it. So I was like, man, just don't even worry about that stuff.
Well, the whole point here is that making a good, you can make a movie. Anybody can make a movie. I got an iPhone. I can make a movie right now. No problem, right? But are you going to make a movie that's going to be compelling, that someone's going to want to watch? And yeah, you can bank on having the next Blair Witch or whatever. But I believe that for the same reasons that our labor market have disrupted, we have an army of young filmmakers who are actually quite talented and capable, who are coming along. But the problem is they're trying to do it all themselves. Like they're trying to self-produce, self-make, and self-distribute movies. And I think that that's a missed opportunity. Because when we put groups of talented people together, it makes for better product. And when we work together and we try to develop platforms like BlackBox that help people do the business end, which is often where things fall apart, right? Like, for example, I make a movie for 10 grand and I call in all the favors in town, right? Well, if that movie ends up going viral and I make, I don't know, $2.5 million on it, how much of that money is going to go back to the people that helped me? There are no deals in place. There's no structure. There's no system. And it's very likely that those people aren't going to get paid because they did it as a favor, right? Yeah. So what BlackBox does is eliminates the favors. We don't do favors. And we don't do deferrals. No one ever gets paid on a deferral. You know anyone that's ever been paid on a deferral? It's a big joke. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I know Hollywood actors, who I talked to, like I was talking to a guy named Martin Kove, who was the sensei in The Karate Kid. And Martin's a great guy. And I said, hey, Martin, how many deferrals have you ever been paid on? He just laughed. He laughed. He said, no, people don't get paid on deferrals. And he's bullish on BlackBox, actually. Like, there's a lot of actors in Hollywood that'll do this because it's not a deferral and it's not a favor. And it's not a rate reduction either. It's a fair share of the movie that you make. So if it makes money and when it makes money, you get paid your share. Our system is guaranteed to pay you. So for a guy that wants to do a $10,000 movie, I would say make $1 million movie, but make sure it's all in kind, and then your fixed costs will only be $10,000 if you happen to have to buy some squibs. So bring the rental house in as a partner, bring the studio in as a partner, bring the locations in as a partner, bring the actors in, bring the crew in, bring everybody in as a partner. I mean, even to the point where you're making an indie and you say, you know what, we're not catering this, bring your own lunch, right? And make a great movie and capture the passion of all those people and get the best people involved, right? Like, don't get your cousin to hold the boom. Get a sound guy to do it. Get somebody who's really good at it to do it. And then guess what? You're going to have usable audio in post, right? And your movie's not going to sound like crap. And you can get yourself a decent composer. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And we learned all of this through the stock footage thing because you know what we see? We see people who are learning faster, doing better work, and making more money. We've got people actually on our platform right now who are getting ready to quit their jobs and they're not taking gigs anymore because they're making enough money off of their stock footage portfolio to float their boat. And now what they're doing is they're saying, great, I'm floating my boat from my stock work, so I'm going to go make my movie now. And they're going to make it using a BlackBox or the BlackBox platform. I know it's a big idea. Like, a lot of people are sitting out there in your audience right now going, what the hell is Pat talking about? I don't get this at all, right? But because it is a huge, huge shift. It's an absolute, it's a paradigm shift. Like, it's revolutionary. And I'm not saying that because, hey, Pat's a smart guy, he did a revolutionary thing. I actually did this so that I could have a better life facing a disruptive market. And I did it so that my peeps, the creators who I know, could have a better life too. And we did it as well so that the guy living in Nairobi, which is a bad place to be right now with all the flooding, but the guy living in Nairobi could go out and capture images of all the wonderful natural beauty that there is in Nairobi or in Kenya, as opposed to having a bunch of white guys fly in on a plane with an Arri Alexa and leave with all the imagery, and all the guy got was his porter fee. So we can actually go in and train that guy and maybe even help him get equipped so that he can be the content creator because he's possibly very talented. So we're going to liberate a lot of creators using this platform, and we're going to flatten out the world, and we're going to make it a fair deal.
Yeah, and when you were talking about everyone getting paid deferrals and stuff like that, it always reminds me of what they call the Hollywood accounting side of things, where people get points and the movie never turns a profit, so you never see those points. Yep. But when you were talking about BlackBox, Pat, I all of this makes sense to me. It sounds like a really, really, really cool platform where people can actually collectively get together. And if you do decide to, hey, hire this DP or hire this person or hire this whatever, people will get, now are bounded to get paid rather than deferrals or promises or, whatever, which sometimes, by the way, I just want to mention, I've seen that get people into a lot of trouble before too. Deferrals. I actually had a project, not that I saw, I wasn't involved in, and feelings were let out on Facebook, and you know what happens then, Pat? It just snowballs, and all of a sudden you have people yelling at each other on social media.
Exactly, it just gets ugly.
Exactly.
Because, the one point I would like to leave people with is that you can work or you can earn. Okay, so BlackBox allows people to earn. It converts you from being a worker into an earner and an owner of the content that you make. It's like there's lots of good analogies out there. I think farming is a good analogy. Do you want to be a paid farm worker getting a low rate, or do you want to be a sharecropper and own part of the product that goes out? And so what we're creating is an environment where you have that choice, because nobody works in BlackBox. It's not a job. It's not a gig. Not at all, actually. It's very different. And just so everybody knows, the website is www.blackbox.global. It's not a .com, it's a .global. So www.blackbox.global. I had to throw that in there, Dave. And, come to the website, check it out, see what you think. It doesn't cost anything to join this. If you do join, we want to see you get active, and we're going to try to help you do that. But it's not free candy. Like, you got to work. You got to do the work. And, there's stuff that you have to do. You got to make content. You got to edit it. You got to curate it. You got to upload it. But if you're trying to go to 5 stock footage libraries right now, you got to upload 5 times. And it is not fun work. So we take that whole aggro out for you. And then if you're trying to share revenue with a collaborator, like, for instance, if you want to do a shoot tomorrow with 3 models in a cafe, you could actually, instead of having to pay the cafe and the models, you could say to the models in the cafe and find people who are willing to do this to take a share of the revenue of the footage. Awesome. And we got a lot of people doing this. We have a member that did a cool shoot in a hospital and did a whole bunch of medical stuff. And everybody is getting paid on a share basis. So you see these little micro transactions going through. But it adds up. It really does. Like, a lot of the stuff that I've done, I've been lucky. I'm not a genius cinematographer or anything, but I know what I'm doing. And I've done lots and lots of shoots where I go out for a week and do wildlife stuff, where I would have gotten paid anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 for the week if I was working for a network. And my projection on some of those shoots is $100,000 to me, because the market is the market demand is so high for that type of footage. So, like, you can make your day rate over a period of years using BlackBox, or you can make 5 to 10 times your day rate or more. And we've got lots of examples of that. Some really spectacular examples of people making a lot more money doing this than they would get on a gig. So it's looking really, really promising. We're really excited. And we really want to welcome as many creators in. I mean, Dave, I'm going to invite you to join, bud. Just go to the website and register, and maybe you got a bunch of clips you want to throw up there and be part of the community. And that's another thing about this. We got a great community feel. Like, we have a Facebook group for members where it's the least toxic Facebook group I've ever seen. It's almost too nice. and everybody is so cooperative and supportive and is getting into the spirit of what we're trying to do, because it's Black Box is not a dog eat dog world. It's a place where we're all in it together, and when one person succeeds, everybody succeeds.
You know, I'm going to link to all that in the show notes, everybody. And I'm going to check it out. I'm dead serious, Pat. I also want to check out this non-toxic Facebook group, because I have one myself, and I keep it. I'm the moderator, so it's always kept non-toxic. But I've never seen anybody else have a non-toxic Facebook group, because usually it devoids into something. And funny enough, it's usually screenwriting Facebook groups that go bad pretty fast. And I've seen the fights, and I've seen everything else, man. But I was going to ask you where can people find you out online, but I will make sure to link to that. You already gave the URL, but I'm going to link to that and everything else we talked about, everyone, in the show notes at davebullis.com. Pat, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Man, it's been a real pleasure. You're a great interviewer, so thanks for that.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for letting me talk about Black Box.
My pleasure, Pat. And let's talk again real soon.
You got it, brother. Thanks a million.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.